Hey guys, good evening. Teresa Poor here. I am excited to invite you to our Seven Pillars talk show where we dig into the seven pillars of building an unbreakable life. What are those seven pillars? Well, you're going to learn a lot about one of them tonight as I invite one of my friends, Dr. Cindy. Oh, I maybe gave that away as I said doctor. But the seven pillars of building an unbreakable life are self-discovery, our mindset slash mind shifting, our belief system, our defining moments and trauma. Number 5 is health, and we are going to get into that tonight. Number 6 is community, and 7 is identifying and walking in your purpose. And so Seven Pillars Talk Show is all about empowering you with individuals that can help you discover a little bit more about who you are, give you the tools and the resources to build and live that unbreakable life. Well, tonight I want to say hello to you all and invite my beautiful friend, Dr. Cindy, on the call tonight. She is with Oasis of Health outside of Taylor / Hutto, Texas. It's kind of like this big area that's growing like crazy. But Dr. Cindy has a wealth of information. And tonight we're going to dig into something pretty specific. But before I go into those details, let me invite my friend, Dr. Cindy, to the stage, and we will get this party started. Hey, Dr. Cindy.
Hi, great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, it's always great to see you. Dr. Cindy and I get to see each other every Thursday morning, but this Thursday morning we didn't get to see each other. So I'm extra blessed that she is with us here tonight. But Dr. Cindy is a naturopath doctor and has been practicing for many, many years. And about 2.5 years ago, I got connected with Dr. Cindy and fell in love with the way she loves and supports her patients. And tonight she's going to tell you a little bit about, who she is, what naturopath care is, and really what DNA has to say about you uniquely. So Dr. Cindy, would you please give us a nice introduction, who you are, how they can find you, and what your passion is?
Okay, well, I'm Dr. Cindy Stewart, and I am a naturopathic doctor. That just means that I don't prescribe medications. I try to track down the answer to what's going on with your health problems and do it in as natural of a way as we can possibly do it to support your body so that your body can heal and make everything that it needs to make you healthy again. So that's basically what I do, and I've got all kinds of different certifications, and I've studied all kinds of different areas. And it just kind of depends. When I start meeting with people, I ask them what their main concerns are. I try and repeat that back to them so I make sure that I am hearing them correctly. And then I try and tailor their program to whatever they need. So that's what I'm doing. But one of the things that if there are people that have questions tonight, one of the things that would help me greatly if you're on here or in the chat later on is to start telling me about who you are and why you're interested in learning about the genes. Is there a specific reason that you are thinking maybe your genes are turned off, and that could be the reason why you can't get your health back? So if you have questions, please ask them, and Teresa will give them to me, and I'll try and answer those because I really want to address what's important to you guys tonight. And then what do you guys know about your DNA? Everybody knows, okay, we've got that little double helix ladder chain, and it's got all these genetic SNPs in it, and that's supposed to tell us who we are. So that's basically what I want to talk about tonight is the DNA and the genetics, and see what's going on inside of that really cool made body that we've got.
Yeah, I love it. I was having a conversation very similar to this with one of my friends, Meg, who you met, and you guys will get to meet Dr. Cindy in person if you come to the next Unbreakable conference, which is on August 22nd. And she was our guest speaker at our last conference. We had a whole health panel and talked a lot about some of the health concerns that people face on a regular basis. And one of the things that came up really in that panel, and Dr. Cindy, I just want to say, God really used you to speak to some people, at Unbreakable. We had some people whose lives were changed and whose families are in the process of getting healing because they met you. So I want to say thank you for being you and showing up authentically. But one of the things that came up in this conversation I had last week with Meg, a friend of mine, was, we get like this little bitty study time in school and regular education around DNA. And it might even not be human DNA. I don't even remember like what we learned about in DNA, but it is so important, right? Our individual DNA has a lot to say about who we are and how we operate, and the things that work for our bodies and the things that don't work for our bodies. Can you talk a little bit about how what that little ladder means, and
Sure.
how those codes actually tell our story?
Okay, so in our DNA, we've got these genetic SNPs, and it's just codes. It's all codes. And sometimes those codes get messed up, or they get broken, or they get mutated to something different. And all of that can happen because of some kind of chemical or toxin or parasite. But it's really interesting to me that some people never get sick ever. They just go on and they're fine. And then other people constantly have parasite infections, or they have got osteoporosis, or two people that have been raised in the exact same family and raised the same way, but one is sick and the other one's not. So why is that? If they have the same foods, they had the same upbringing, they had the same kind of exercise programs or lack of exercise programs, why is one healthy and the other one's not? Why does one get cancer and the other one doesn't? Well, I used to always wonder that because I getting through college, I cleaned houses. And I cleaned for this Marine whose name is Mr. Saint, and he was 98 years old. And this man literally lived on the Marlboro unfiltered cigarettes. He drank all kinds of coffee and sodas, and he lived on these little peppermint patty, the little red and white little peppermints, and he baked these breads that were from a box. And that's all he ever ate. It's all he ever had in his house. And that man at 98 was healthier and stronger than most of us are. So how is it that he could be so healthy, but somebody else in their 30s or 40s would have died from lung cancer from smoking and chain smoking the way that he did? And that has to do with our genetics, what we inherited, how it came together, how it all plays into the way that our lives are going to play out. So that's exactly what genetics are. They're the ones that are going to say, okay, you're the ones that are going to be sick. You're the one that's going to have a vitamin D deficiency that you can't ever get fixed. Or you're the one that is going to be the athlete that has extraordinary health, and you just can achieve all kinds of things. And you have tons of energy instead of being weak and fatigued and worn out. So that is what our genes do for us. So they are the ones that determine depression or anxiety or being anxious. And once we can find it by doing the DNA testing, we can help to find how to fix that. So I find it interesting that everybody says, oh, you just need to pick yourself up and get yourself going. If you'd get out there and exercise, your depression would be gone. Well, not necessarily. If you have a genetic SNP or mutation in there, it may not be okay to ever just get up and be able to do that. So that's what the DNA does.
Wow. Wow. I think I also had like a grandma. Well, she wasn't a grandmother. She was an aunt, but she was like 99 years old. Same kind of situation, except I think some alcohol was involved with that one too. But I think that is so interesting. And we don't really think about that a lot. We're in such a consumer driven world where we're just consuming things and not really paying attention to the side effects, but we're feeling the side effects as it relates to how we feel, how we sleep or don't sleep, how we respond in situations positively or negatively, and of course, how our body responds to the foods and things of that nature. So I love how you started with that story, because I bet that the Food and Drug Administration would probably say that's not a healthy way to live, right? And and in fact, so many things that we see around health is really driven on a one size fits all approach. But as you really described in that imagery, that story, we're all very different. So, can you talk a little bit about, why would somebody want to learn about their DNA, and how can that empower them?
Okay. The way that it would empower them is they would have answers to their health challenges, that they've tried all kinds of different doctors. They've tried all kinds of different nutrients or different kinds of therapies. And they're like, nothing is working. I have tried. I have been diligent. I have followed through. If a person told me to go 6 months without eating any particular foods, or I did a specific diet and I was diligent, I didn't miss a single time, and I'm still sick. So that's where the genes and the genetics come in. We've got to go back in there, and we have to trace it down to what is happening in your DNA that's caused you to be different. So a lot of times you've got this big, beautiful tree, and then you've got the root system that's down below. And we've all been trying to feed the soil and figure it out. But each one of those branches could be a genetic snip that says, hey, this is going to lead to mental and emotional stress. Or this branch is going to lead to nutritional deficiencies. Or this one will lead to physical trauma or to toxins. And people that are just never, ever able to get done. You're constantly doing detox programs with them. So that DNA is what is the code that tells you how you're going to be in those different areas. So one of the areas that I wanted to show you, and this is going to be hard to see, but it's pretty cool. I'll see if I can put that up there. And yes, this is just part of the genetics pathway of what happens in people's lives. So that gives you just one little tiny snip of what I go through to help people find answers to their problems. So it looks really complicated, but once you study it, it's absolutely fascinating, because each one of these little cycles, these little parts that are here, are inside of every one of your cells. And if you happen to have a genetic mutation, and this, you see what happens is you get one gene from your mom and one gene from your dad. And so if they're together and they're healthy, then you get a really healthy body. But if there's a genetic mutation that comes in from mom's side, that will be a heterozygous mutation. And that one will change things a little bit. But if mom and dad both give you a mutated gene, then that's a homozygous, and they're going to all get to where that's more complicated. It makes it to where you're less healthy. So the genes that you receive really are important. And there have been a couple of cases that I worked on that when we've looked at these children, we know something's terribly wrong, but it seems to be happening more and more often that these kids are getting mutated genes that are really severe. I mean, as in they're not going to live but a few years, or they will never be okay. There are certain genes that we can't fix once they've been mutated. For instance, Down syndrome, that is a chromosome that will never be able to be fixed. So there's certain things we can't fix. But when we start looking at all of these different pathways of, well, for instance, the vitamin D cycle or the Krebs cycle, or some of those that are in all of our mitochondria, it's going to make a difference whether we're healthy or whether we're not. And it also tells us whether we are going to be a happy person or a really sad person, or an outgoing or an introvert. So the genes have a lot to do with who you truly are. And it's really cool the way that God put this all together, because then we can see that how he made all of us so unique, and that he wants us to be able to be as healthy as possible. So when we take and go into that DNA, and that little double helix, it's your genes, that spins around, and it's got these little codes of A, C, T, G, and they are in the correct order, then you're fine. But if one of those A, C, T, or G's gets replaced with the wrong letter because the ladder slid, or because it broke, then you get some different things that make it harder to be able to get the answers you want to for your life. And you're like, why am I always having problems? Why am I always sad? Why am I always down? So the point that I do want to make too is that genetics influences your body maybe 5 to 10%. And a whole lot of the time, unless you have a really, really severe one, like these kids that I was talking about, usually with the genetics, it's about 10% that the genetics are going to determine whether you're going to be having a problem. The rest of it has to do with your environment. Did you eat right? Did you sleep right? Do you keep yourself hygienically clean? Do you eat clean, pure foods? Do you drink water? So it's kind of like the genetics is the gun, but your environment pulls the trigger on activating something. So whether it is breast cancer and you have the BRCA genes that you're worried about maybe developing breast cancer, you can keep those turned off by a whole lot of factors most of the time. And those factors would be something like stress. I'm telling you, stress is a killer for a lot of people. Now, some people can handle a huge amount of stress and they do fine, but other people, stress just takes them down and wipes them out. But when it comes to having the BRCA gene for breast cancer, you need to control the stress. You got to find some stress relievers. You have to get out of stressful relationships. You have to get out of toxic environments. Toxic environments, I mean the relationships that you're in. Sure. I totally believe that God said that we're supposed to be married for life, and I love that. But there are times when abuse is not worth it, and those will activate the BRCA genes. Or if you have a tremendous amount of junk food in your life, that's going to activate the BRCA genes to turn on breast cancer. Just things like that, that you really do have this idea that the gun is your genetics, and you can have 10% of that. The trigger is your environment, what you've done in your life. If you never exercise, if you never drink good, clean, pure water, those kinds of things. So does that answer that for you?
I think so. I feel like knowledge is absolutely powerful, right? And then what do we do with that knowledge once we receive it? I think a lot of times, we don't want to get certain DNA testing done because then it kind of plants this seed in your mind that, well, I have this gene, therefore XYZ is going to happen. And it's almost like we're predestining, or, like we're predetermining that this is going to happen. But as you said, lifestyle, and we have some controllables in those situations. And I think it's so helpful to say that, because a lot of times, we grab hold of a piece of data and we let it take root, and then we feed it and feed it and feed it and feed it. So I do think it's important, that when somebody wants to discover information like that they have a resource that helps guide them through, okay, what do I do with this information now? And that was something I learned when I went through my personal health journey. Was there were two times. There was one time I took a food sensitivity test, and we'll go into that, I'm sure, because it's fascinating. But I had a friend who was like, hey, let's do this allergy test on you. I'm like, I'm not allergic to anything except for everything, like all the seasonal stuff. But she did the test and she was like, oh my God, Teresa, you're allergic to eggs. And I'm like, no, I don't, because I eat them every day. That must be silly. I'm not going to believe this. I wasted money. So that was one time. And then the second time I did it, I was in a different mindset, but the person just like you that gave me this other testing had a process of walking me through it. And so consequently, I was still allergic to eggs. And in fact, since that point, I haven't eaten an egg, which I need to come see you so I can start eating eggs again. But it's funny that when you work with somebody like yourself, that's going to be your guide in the process, now you've got somebody with you that can help activate some of that knowledge, as opposed to just knowledge in, plant a seed, oh my gosh, gloom and doom, or knowledge in, I don't believe it, adios, I'm going back to eating eggs, right?
Right. Right.
So can you talk a little bit about, if somebody you was like, okay, this is fascinating and I want to find out what my DNA is, because, and here's where I got, Dr. Cindy, I got to the place where I had been on a healing journey of emotional healing, and really just releasing some things. I was going through what I didn't know would become the 7 pillars of an unbreakable life. I didn't know that's what God was showing me, but that was the process essentially that I went through. And I had dealt with my thoughts and my beliefs, and I dealt with my mindset and the things that God needed to shift, but my health was out of line. And because my health was out of line, I was still hijacking all the work that I had done, mindset, beliefs, all of those things, because I was unhealthy.
Right.
Because I was tired, because, those hangry feelings and all of that stuff would override the work that I had already done. And so I still was like not feeling 100%. So can you talk a little bit about, your process for helping people live a healthier life?
Well, since tonight we're talking about genes and DNA, the way that I would work with a person's DNA is I would have them get the 23andMe testing done. And I don't want them to get the $35 one. I want them to get the one that's $200. And if you watch for like Father's Day, Mother's Day, Christmas, they usually discount that down to almost half. And then you can get the testing done. And then inside of there, I'm going to need this genetic codes. And it's just numbers, just pages and pages and pages of numbers. So we take those numbers and I put it into a system that I have, and that's going to start telling me what's off in the DNA. So it's going to tell me if everything is good and everything is balanced, or if you've got one genetic mutation, which is heterozygous, or if you've got the two and mutations and that's homozygous. if you just have one, that's going to shut your body's pathway down for that one mutation by 30%. If you have both of those off and turned off, it's going to shut down that pathway by 70%. And what you have to understand is when you take this little chart that I'm showing you and you look at just this one pathway here, if something goes wrong here, it affects everything over here. It affects everything over here. So I take those genetic SNPs that they give me and I start looking at the pathways. And there is a specific order that we have to start testing all of these different variants and different pathways to be able to get it to where people do not go into a healing crisis or a toxin dump, and they just feel like they're going to die because it's too powerful and too fast. So I take the 23andMe, I take that information, and I always tell people, do not put your real name on that 23andMe. When you get it, you're going to get a little barcode. Take a picture of the barcode, save it in several places, create a false name to put on there so that that cannot be traced back to you. And the reason I say that is because 23andMe will sell this data to pharmaceutical companies, to anybody that wants it. And that's how they have become so incredibly powerful and rich. And I don't want it to be traced back to anybody. For instance, if I find out that they have a particular background of, right now, a problem has been for people that have certain backgrounds and they're being targeted because of that. So even if they're 25% of this one race, they're being targeted and things can come back on them. And so I don't ever like people to use their real name. So that's just a caution that I like to put out there. So we take.
Do they sell that to like the Medical Information Bureau as well?
They sell it to everybody that wants it. Anybody and everybody. They're making lots of money doing it that way.
That could say you're not eligible for health insurance, couldn't it?
That's exactly right. Yes, it can. Eventually, it could get to that point. They're not doing it right now, but that's what they're doing, is collecting all this data, all of this information to try and see how things run. Okay, if you have these genes, is it going to be that this is a propensity for you to have this particular disease? So we won't insure you for that disease. But that's why I say if you do it with the false name, then you're okay, and they can't find you. But store that name somewhere too that you can remember. And yes, you really don't need. I mean, I'm not going to sell it to anybody. I promise you, I'm not that kind of person, and I want people to get the help that they need. But one of the things that I find fascinating, and I know I've shared this with you, Teresa, was that in the genes, you have genes that make you possibly more aggressive and more angry, and you're more likely to do some pretty violent things. So there was this one researcher that was working in a prison, and he decided that he was going to find out if the inmates that had done really bad crimes, murders and things like that, if they carried this one genetic SNP. Well, he ran through all of the prison people and found out the majority of them did have that particular genetic variation. And then he decided to do his, so he was looking through here and he was looking through the file and got to this one piece of paper and he said, wow, this person has this and this and this genetic mutation. And I wonder who they are and who they've killed and how many they've killed and what they've done. And he looks at the name and it's his name. And he was like, oh no, that can't be. This has to be wrong. They've got something mixed up. But then he thought, well, I'll just ask my friends and my family. And he asked them, is it possible that I could ever be this cruel? And the people that knew him said, oh, you can be really cruel. You can be so blunt and you can just cut through everything and hurt people's feelings. And the difference was so many of the people that were in the prisons had no help in their life. They were either abandoned, they had no one there to support them, they had really bad upbringing, a lot of them. That's not 100% of the case. Some people just choose to be that way. But the majority of them didn't have the food that they needed. They didn't have the clothes that they needed. They were not taken care of. But this particular man that was the researcher, he had a wonderful, loving family that kept him in line, showed him a better way, gave him choices and options, and they were kind to him. They were good to him. They gave him the hope that there was something better out there instead of just being so mean and just doing whatever you wanted. And they didn't they didn't beat him. A lot of the other people had been raised in alcoholic families, drug families, or the parents were incredibly abusive to the kids, either verbally, mentally, physically, psychologically, just horrible to them. So again, that was the genetics. And yes, they were loaded in a really bad way to go the wrong way. But the environment that they had definitely pushed them that way. If they could have had a better loving family, maybe they would have turned out like this researcher did and do some good for the world. So the way
Wow.
that the DNA works is it helps to figure out what genetic SNPs do you have. And so if you, for instance, let's just say that one of the genetic SNPs is an ACAT, ACAT. So if you happen to have a mutation in that one, and it's just in the, this one is in the cardiovascular line, okay? It's just a whole entire pathway for the cardiovascular. So this one will make sense. If you have genetic mutations in this, you have a possibility of having high cholesterol, hyperlipidemia, atherosclerosis, heart disease, low energy, high oxalates and kidney stones, lactic acid, mitochondrial dysfunction, digestive issues, bloating stools, and gallbladder imbalances. So that's just one little SNP in there, and there's lots and lots of them that we look at. So that's how it works. Yeah.
Wow, that is so interesting. I love that illustration of the environment, right? And so, with that being said, you're probably talking to some parents on here tonight or people that are going to watch this over the next couple of days. And of course, we want the absolute best for our children. And maybe we have no control over their DNA because we didn't have control over ours, but we do have control around environment that will affect, right? So what would be a piece of information? And by the way, we do have some viewers on. I don't see any questions yet, but guys, Dr. Cindy is a wealth of knowledge. And if you happen to have a question, DNA related, how it affects your mindset, how it affects your emotions, how it affects your health in any capacity, please put those questions in here so we can really make best use of your time for joining us tonight. But Dr. Cindy, how would you speak about us as, parents? How can we create an environment that fosters, love and belonging, of course, but what are some things that we can do to be that you're seeing, overall in today's environment? Maybe we're not doing it. Maybe we're distracted. Maybe we're not being the mean parent, but there may be some things that aren't giving our kiddos nurturing the way that they need to. So can you talk about that?
Well, some of these things are not going to lead to a really serial killer or something like that. But this is just, that's a whole really far out there spectrum, but it can happen. But one of the main things that I see is children are watching their cell phones too much, but then the parents are on their cell phones too much. And if you've ever watched kids and they're waiting and they're waiting and they're waiting, when can they come up and talk to mom and dad? Or when is it their turn to get mom and dad's attention? Or the parents get upset because they've been asked a question while they're talking to someone on the phone. It really does need to be that you put your phone aside and I've been at restaurants and we've got 6 people at the table. Every person is on a cell phone or a little iPad or something for the kids to play with. And nobody's talking to each other. They're talking to everybody else through all of these other mechanisms, but they're not talking to themselves. So at the dinner table, there is no electronics. Everybody sits there and they talk and they help with the dishes and they help with making the meal. So get back to having family time so that the kids know that they're important, because the message that the kids are getting is everybody on that phone is better and more important than I am. And so they will not ever develop a way to talk to mom and dad. And that's what we're finding now with a lot of the teenagers as they're going out into the workforce. They can talk on their iPhones and they would rather text you than do an eye-to-eye conversation. And that's hard when they're trying to get a job and they need to be able to interact with people through day-to-day life. So number one would be get off of those cell phones, put them away, interact with the kids, play games with them, go outside, run with them, play, do anything that you can do, go on bike rides, but get something going with them one-on-one so that they're not feeling like they are way down on the list of priority. Because as soon as that phone rings, even if they're in the middle of a conversation with a child, they'll stop that conversation with the child, take that phone, and their child is told to wait and be put off for another time. So spend time every day just doing that with them, and especially the little kids, read to them a lot. Or as they get through school, have the middle school kids read to you or do homework with them. But make it to where you're focusing on them, that they are a true priority, that they are important. And that's been one of the main things. But then also the food that we feed these kids is horrible nowadays. It's called the standard American diet, and it actually fuels the brain to be on fire with inflammation. So these children that are getting all the junk food, and everybody thinks, oh, I can just pop the chicken nuggets in their mouths and we're fine. No, if you look at the chemicals that are in those, that is not a whole food. Or French fries with all the chemicals that are in that. And you're wondering why your kids are acting out with the ice cream and the soda pops, and you think that they're just being disrespectful and they're being rude. No, you have given them something that literally puts their brain on fire. And sometimes inside their little brains, it's going back and forth, and they just can't control themselves. And they don't mean to be that ADD, ADHD. But when you start changing the foods, even though you think, man, it's not doing anything for the first week or two, it will over time, and it'll calm them down. So if you give them the real food, or the fruits and the vegetables, and I'm sorry, but milk in the United States, we have more milk given to this country than in any other country in the world, and we have more osteoporosis and osteopenia than any other nation in the world. So milk, when it's pasteurized and not raw, makes it to where it's completely dead. It's not a live food. And you have to have live foods with the vitamins and the minerals and the enzymes in order for you to have something to power your body with. So when you're putting in soda pop, number one, it's leaching all the calcium out of the bones. But also these kids that, I just cringe. My daughter the other day, it's been a year or two ago, we were walking through a store and I saw a mom pour soda pop into a baby's bottle and give this little 1-year-old or less a bottle of soda pop. And Joy grabs me and she pulls me away and she said, Mom, that's not your child. You can't do that. You cannot go talk to her. But literally, when you put soda pop into your body, or any of this junk food, these potato chips that have nothing left in them, or the processed refined foods of all the Cheez-Its crackers, or even the supposed to be protein bars, those are negative calorie foods, and they are pulling the vitamins and minerals out of your body to process that food, or the junk, whatever it is. It's really not food. It's pulling all the vitamins and mineral out. So it's a negative calorie food, and it's costing you money in terms of you haven't put anything in there that's good for them. So I know that kids grow fast, and I know that they have great appetites, and they seem like they're always hungry when they're teenagers. But when you feed somebody something that has no value, then your body says, okay, I am still hungry because I didn't get anything that would nourish my cells or allow me to grow good cells or good organs. And I am hungry. And that's how a lot of people are putting on weight. And it's sad. I've got so many things I want to say, but when you put that food in there and they don't get any nutrition, and their brains start to deteriorate because they can't function well and they can't learn as well and they're not as smart as they should be, that is serious. When you put that food in there and it is robbing everything from them, and then they go off and they hit people, or they bite people, or they get into fights, they're hungry, their bodies are starving to death, and they aren't getting what they need. So that's when we start getting and developing a lot of skin rashes and psoriasis and eczema. There's something that they're not getting that they need in their system. And that's where we can either look at the DNA, or we can, because DNA is pretty cool. I mean, you can do DNA on a child. It's super easy. And it's not hard to gather the DNA. And the neat thing is about it is once you've got it there, and we can just work on it for the rest of their, you don't have to redo the test all the time, is what I'm saying. Like blood work, we have to always redo blood work because we know that it's going to change. And the DNA is pretty much there. So to take care of the kids and to take care of the families, spend time together, but make it quality time. Make it to where you're actually focused on them and you're not doing other things. Do activities together, do arts and crafts, do anything that's a creative type thing is wonderful for the kids' brains. And exercise for the kids' brain, they've got all these little gadgets now. They're the fidget toys, the little pop things that you pop all these things on. And they're wanting the kids to have these in class because they have to have these fidget toys and these little spinners and all that. The best thing that you could do is to get these kids outside in the sunshine, exercising, running, playing, doing basketball. Get them moving. That's going to help better and calm them down more for being in the classroom than these little fidget things, because their whole bodies need to run. That's what they were designed to do. They're children. They need to do arts and craft. They need to be outside playing, and they need to be interacting with each other. Their playtime is their work time, and it'll develop into a whole entire process where they can develop that mind and create it the way it's supposed to be.
I think that's so good. I remember when you were talking about that. I remember, and this is so horrible, so nobody stoned me for saying this, but like when we got a puppy, and I felt so bad about sticking a puppy in an apartment when Royal and I were young, and we got this blue heeler puppy and stuck it in an apartment, right? And had to take it outside and do all the things. But you think about that, and it's easy for us to think, well, the puppy needs to play, because we think about. But you're right. If we're not doing that for our kids and giving them the opportunity to get out and play and run around and use those calories. But one thing I would love for you to talk about a little bit, because I remember you told me this one time when I was asking you about artificial sweeteners, and you talked about how it kills brain cells. So, but so maybe I'm quoting that wrong, but I'm like, I'm never taking that one ever again. But what I really want to get at is you talked about us being hungry, and that it's, kind of expensive to eat whole foods. But one thing I've noticed in myself is that now that I've been eating properly and fueling my body better, I'm not hungry. And I know I'm fulfilling like I'm not starving. I'm not, I'm getting stronger. My body feels so much better. And it's not any more expensive. In fact, the food I eat, I can eat in a smaller quantity because I'm getting more out of it. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think we have this mindset as a culture that it's so expensive to eat healthy, but we don't eat as much if it's real ingredients than we do if it's all processed. At least that's what I've experienced.
Right. Right. So you can buy sweet potatoes or a big bag of 10 pounds of potatoes and cook them yourselves in your air fryer. And that's going to be healthier than buying your potato chips that are cooked in deep fried grease and stuff. But what you were talking about was the excitotoxins. Anything that is an artificial sweetener is an excitotoxin, and it literally explodes the neurons in your brain. So when you're exploding neurons in your brain, that's bad. We've only got so many, and those things just are really, really, really slow, almost non-existent to regrow that brain cells. So you don't want to explode those. So that means anything that is a diet drink of any kind of diet drink, if it has aspartame, NutraSweet, and they have all kinds of new names that they've come up with as people have learned that this particular name brand or this particular name is a bad thing for you. And so those excitotoxins are also things like nitrates and nitrites in the meats. So when you combine a diet drink with a pepperoni pizza with the nitrates in there, it has been shown that the leukemia in children skyrockets. So we're feeding these kids that are cancer-causing foods. And we don't have to do that, because I can guarantee you that one case of cancer or leukemia is a whole lot more expensive than going out and going to the grocery store, buying the raw foods, buying the basics to be able to make your own foods and own recipes and have a better lifestyle, because cancer costs a lot of money and a death of a child is very, very expensive. So everybody thinks, well, but I can go buy this whole bag of chips and I can buy the cookies and it's a lot less expensive. But there are some great books out there. Like one of the ones that I love is a book that's called Fully Raw, Fully Raw by Christina. And I don't expect people to go fully raw, okay? The idea is to go through this and find some of the recipes that you and your family like. So once a week, start introducing some new foods and make something that, oh, wow, they might like this one. And it's interesting because a lot of kids, if you start them younger, they like these good foods. My grandkids love lettuces and salads and vegetables, and that's all they get. We make our own popsicles. I don't buy those little long container sticks that are just food coloring and sugar in there. We actually make our own with raw nuts, of almonds and fruits mixed together, and then we freeze them in little molds. So the to say that eating healthy costs more, that's really not true. Because if you're the one that's a child and you're suffering from a skin disease of the eczema or the psoriasis, that hurts. And I've had people come in and they bring their kids in, and I've told them what I recommend, and they're like, absolutely not. I am not changing our diet. I am not changing anything. I'm not going to spend any more money on this. And I'm thinking, as I'm watching this child crying because it itches so bad and it's scratched raw because it's bleeding.
Right.
If it was that parent that was hurting like that, they would do whatever it took to get themselves well. And so that's why the foods really do make a difference. They're either causing the cancers or they're causing people to have problems with ADD, ADHD, the brain can't function. And so it's going into, well, some of it's the genetic things too with the autism or it's crazy when we've put toxins in a child's body that would never be okayed by an FDA in any other area. But when you put a vaccine and you've given these kids 75 vaccines, and I didn't have any hardly the first 6 years of my life, I think I had maybe 2 or 3, and that's it. Now we've got 75. There's something wrong with this picture, and it's become a moneymaker. And if they really look at the fact that vaccines have not had any kind of research done on them, other than that's what they've developed, it's pretty scary. So the vaccines have been causing a lot of health problems for people too. And I've had many people come in and say that when they got the MMR, their child stopped talking. And that's where we start working with them, is trying to get that brain turned back on so they can talk again, and trying to get it to where they can communicate or want to be around people, because those chemicals put the brain on fire and the child just wants to retreat, just wants to get away, or that's why they do the head banging or things like that. So no, it doesn't cost a lot to eat healthy. You can go to start growing some of your own things. You can go to any of the grocery stores will have some different produces there. And so when you start learning how to cook and you don't waste the food, then it's very easy to switch over and make it to where people can eat healthy food, just like what you said. And a lot of times too, when people think they're hungry, instead of grabbing a bag of chips or cookies, go get a big glass of water and try the water first, because a lot of times you're dehydrated. It's not that you are hungry. Your body just is telling you, I need water, but you have lost that ability to recognize that you're thirsty.
Yeah, that's so smart and so true. And I love all of this. I think it's so fascinating, and tying it together when we think about, the DNA, and we think about, the manifestations that we get because of our genes, and then because of our environment. One of the things that was so empowering for me was to take my DNA, and to take my food sensitivity, and to take my hormones, and kind of layer that all together to create, this is what your body can and can't do, what your body isn't doing, what's going on with you. I jokingly say that I earned a PhD in me. Like, isn't that fun?
Yes.
But so many of us, we don't even want to get a diploma in ourselves. Like, we don't even want to finish high school because we're distracted. We're moving on to the next thing. And we really put ourselves so low down on the totem pole that we don't honor our bodies. And then we have that life sentence essentially associated with it. So, so could you talk a little bit about what you see when you mirror those things together, when you take the genetics and you take the food and you take, the other conditioning things? Maybe it's hormones, maybe it's environment. I know that in your practice, you look at so many things. How could that be empowering for somebody? Because, my theme is taking back your power. And
Right.
if we give our power away in our health, we can't function fully in any area. So how could you take that and make a pretty puzzle for somebody that really empowers them?
Well, for one thing, foods do make a difference. If you have a genetic mutation that is going to say you're not going to be able to eat wheat or soy, and it's amazing how many people truly cannot eat those two substances, or dairy. And if you, some of the time we can make it using a technique called Nambujapad's allergy elimination technique, NAET, and I can take it and make it to where a person is not sensitive to that food anymore, for peanuts or shellfish or something like that. But what about if we go in and we fix the DNA to where those pathways cycle through, and when we fix the body, their DNA fixes, then you don't create that allergic reaction to the food, or you don't create the homocysteine, or the, not the homocysteine, the histamine over response that causes the environmental allergies or the allergy to the food. A lot of people don't realize that sometimes if they would pay attention and they had just eaten one food and their nose starts running or their throat starts itching or their stomach starts hurting, they're allergic to that food. And it may not be an anaphylactic shock reaction where they pass out, but their body is still doesn't like that food. It's not responding well. And the reason I don't like soy a lot is because it really is not the old soy that they used to have. It's been genetically modified. It's very high in estrogens. And a lot of women already have a high estrogen count anyway. So you start putting soy in there and it starts growing cysts. It starts growing extra growths. And people think, I've got so many people that have told me, well, I just had one cyst in my nose. Or yeah, I have cysts on my ovaries and they break every 3 months and I'm in terrible pain. That's not normal. It is, you're not supposed to have those cysts. It means that your body is set up to grow other things that are not supposed to be there. And that means it's set up to grow cancer. So for instance, a lot of people, if we check their urine is very, very acidic. And cancer loves to grow in an acidic environment. So if you put foods into your body that are high in estrogen, that are going to cause it to become more inflamed and grow more cysts and more cancers, then foods do make a difference, more than most people do realize. So between the genetics and the food and then the hormones, oh my goodness. Once we go through here and we balance all of these little areas, which it looks a lot, but it's step by step. It's as easy as ABC 1, 2, 3. We just go through and balance it as easy as that. Then once we get the hormone pathways done, and those are balanced because we've balanced all of these other things, the hormones start working right. And all the food cycles start working right. Things change. People get energy. Some of these different areas that are on here, if you have a certain area, like in the Krebs cycle, which is that area right there, if you have a genetic mutation and the ACAT or the MMAB do not work the way they should, that makes it to where people tend to gain weight and they have a terrible time losing weight. And so they can go on all of these diets and nothing's going to get that weight off for them. And they're frustrated and they feel like failures. And it's like, it's not because you failed. It's because of this genetic pathway that's here, that's turned off, that's not working. And once you get that balanced a little bit, then you can start getting the weight off easier. Some people, they're just set up to always have a weight issue. It kind of goes back to the days of, if there was a famine in the land and they didn't have enough food, then a lot of people died. But the people that survived were the ones that had the genes that they could slow their metabolism down. They didn't need as much food to survive. And so they could live on less. And they were the ones that were surviving. So they were fine during the famine. I mean, not fine, but they survived it. And then they passed on those genes to where they had the slower metabolism, which was good in a famine, but it's not good when you're in a land of plentiful and you eat all day long and you're eating all this junk food, because that slow metabolism is going to cause you to gain weight. And it gains a lot of weight for some people. So that's one of the things that happens.
I think that's really empowering to know that certain things, we don't, in the Christian, I don't believe a whole lot in like traditional evolution, right? That we think about, but we do evolve, and we adapt, I guess is maybe a different way of saying it. But as you made that beautiful illustration right there, our bodies came to a place that, okay, I'm going to survive. And if I'm passing that on, they talk about our reptilian brain too, right? How we were in the fight and flight and all of those things. And we still operate in that, except we don't have a bear chasing us anymore. And so instead we have anxiety and panic attacks and we don't process things the same way. I think that we don't think about those things. All we think about as a whole typically is what am I dealing with right now? And why do I keep cycling here? And I love when you showed that illustration that sometimes there really is a reason. Like when I got my report done years ago, I went to Royal and I said, there's nothing wrong with me. There's a lot of things wrong with me. Like it was so empowering. Like there was nothing wrong with me here. There was
Mhm.
something wrong with me that wasn't functioning. And there
Right.
was an answer that could be found. And I think that is so powerful.
It is. It gives people the chance to find the answers to things they were looking for. And so there's this one particular program that I like to look at. Everybody says, well, you need to have your blood work drawn and you need to know what your vitamin D level is. And I agree with that, because if your vitamin D is low and it's not up at 80, you will never be able to fight off COVID or
Mhm.
any of the illnesses and infections. But just putting in vitamin D doesn't take care of it, because if the vitamin D receptor is off in this wonderful chart here, if this is off over here, that's like a lock and a key. So you've got the receptor that is your lock, and then you've got the little genetic SNPs and the enzymes and everything they're trying to get in there. They're the key to unlock that, so that that vitamin D can get inside the cell. And if you don't have that unlocked, you can take all the vitamin D you want, and you're not going to get it inside the cell, and it's not going to make you healthy. But you don't want to just flood somebody's system with vitamin D, because if you do, you can activate all these other horrible things around here, because that pathway interacts with the pathway next to it. And if you have too much vitamin D, then it's going to make you make too much serotonin, too much dopamine. You're going to get angry and grouchy and mean and just be a horrible person. So you have to make it to where the DNA can work with what it's been given to get that DNA inside that lock and key to get it inside the cell. And that's not always that easy. And there's a lot of steps to be able to test to see what's going on. So we don't want to make it to where people are worse. We want them to be step by step getting better. So there's so many things that the DNA does and is so influential. It's kind of fun to investigate it and to research, and I can't hardly wait when I get somebody's report. It's like playtime. Let's see what we're going to find, what's in here. And
Yeah.
so just like what you did, you took action and you said, okay, I am tired of being where I'm at. I'm going to figure this out. And yes, it's going to cost me some money, but I don't care. I'm going to get my hormones tested. I'm going to get my foods sensitivities, and I'm going to do my DNA. And look at the answers it gave you.
Yeah. Well, and so I was telling Royal a couple days ago, I said, thank you, babe, for letting me spend that money. Because
Yeah,
honestly, I would have spent the money anyway. I would have spent it on probably shoes, but I do kind of have a shoe addiction. But I would have spent it on something. Money is a fluid thing. It goes in and out. But how much more can I produce? How much more can I support, love, and take care of others if I'm doing that for myself? And I think that's something that, as people are watching tonight and they're wondering, okay, well, what does this have to do with me? Well, it has everything to do with you. Your DNA is you. Like your body is you. And if you want to have that unbreakable life that allows you to avoid certain things, maybe walk through certain things. Like one of the things that we determined in my DNA was that I did not, and I'm glad you brought up COVID, I did not have the gene that said COVID wouldn't get me. Like I had the gene that said you're pretty high risk for getting COVID.
Mhm.
However, because I also had the other tools, I was able to get it out of me super fast.
Right.
Where my DNA said, I could have, it could have been a bad situation for me, but I had tools and resources to help. And I think the same thing applies with anything. This is just a real situation that we've all were exposed to,
Right.
right? And I,
Everybody's exposed. So
yeah,
why did some people get COVID and other people did not get COVID? And that has a lot to do with their DNA. But when you know what your DNA is, then you can do a lot to change it to work in your favor and be prepared. So one of the things that I found fascinating about COVID was we were talking about receptors, remember, with the DNA receptors and lock and key.
yeah,
Well, the people that smoked cigarettes didn't get COVID at the rate that everybody else got COVID. And the reason for that they discovered was because the nicotine in the cigarettes was able to block the COVID because the nicotine had filled up all those receptors. They'd filled up all that. The nicotine was a key, and they'd already filled up all those locks and all those spaces.
There's no
So
room.
get in there. So that's why they didn't get sick as much as the other people. They were like, why is this? This is the one time when smoking was good for people, and it's just who would know? So yes, and you have to have the keys to do it.
Yeah, I think one thing, as you were talking about, and I will wrap it up because I know we could talk forever, and I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I believe our viewers are as well. But one of the things that as you talked about soy specifically, and I mean, you know my story, and probably the rest of the world at this point knows it, but I developed fibroids that were quite large and like cantaloupe size. Like when I had my hysterectomy, it was like giving birth to a child. It was, a huge mass. And I'm of the belief that the amount of soy that I ate as I was trying to live off of a specific diet for a period of time contributed to that because of my sensitivity to soy. And and so, if you could speak for a moment around, and here's what I will say. I thought I was doing something good for myself as I was living on this particular meal plan / diet because I was losing weight and it was a system I could follow, right?
Right.
But now knowing that my body was not it really wasn't honoring my body.
Mm-mm.
And it actually affected my. Can you talk a little bit about, we're in such a consumer, again, driven world where try this, like the thing that shows up on my Facebook all the time now is this mushroom coffee. And I mean, there's so many things, and we become the pros at DIY. Let's just do it ourselves. We don't need a doctor, which I do not believe. I'm not really saying that, but I'm saying that's a mindset that we have, right? That I can just figure it out and I can take control in my own hands. But there's power in having these tests done because I created something, and that was just a real example of something I created by being ignorant towards my body. And wow, had I had these tests done a couple of years ago, I might not have had to have a hysterectomy.
Right. Exactly.
And by the way, my MD, the one that performed the hysterectomy, said fibroids are common. They're normal.
No, they're not. No, our bodies are designed to grow a healthy reproductive system. They are designed by God to reproduce all the time. And we have a choice of putting good things in there that will help you to grow good things. And I think what's happening now is they're common because our diets have changed so much and we put in so many toxins in our system. So now that is true. These doctors are seeing lots and lots of fibroids. Just like with people that are saying, well, it's just one cyst and it's just in my nose that once in a while it'll break. And so, no, those are not a normal condition. You are designed to grow health, and God made us. The power that made the body can heal the body if we give it what it needs and we don't put in the bad things that it doesn't need. And when you're looking at DNA, this is not something to dabble with. This stuff is detailed, and I've studied it extensively. And I'm not bragging. I'm really not. What I'm saying is,
you should. This is a deal.
No, really, there's this saying that you don't want to dabble with it because every single one of these little pathways, if you do it wrong, it affects something else in a negative way, and you can really cause some problems. So figuring out what's going on and having some people help you, unless you go in and you become a geneticist, which I am not a geneticist, but I've taken the courses and done the studying on it to be able to know how to work through the DNA to where we're going to get you to the right outcome instead of, oh, I'll just try throwing some vitamin D in there because she says vitamin D is the right thing. That's not what I'm saying. If you don't have the right things of vitamin A, D, E, K, and C in there and making it all balanced, then it can throw your body into a storm, and it's not a good situation to be in. But Yes, for you, exactly what you said. You got the expert advice that helped you to interpret and put all of those different things and pieces together to make you healthy again. So your body is set up now to where it doesn't have to grow any more cysts. It doesn't have to grow any more of the things that are going to be dangerous to you of a possible cancer later on. I really believe that when your body starts to grow abnormal things, it's a warning sign. It's trying to tell you change something so that you can be healthier, so that you don't have to go down that disease process of fibroids or dementia or Alzheimer's or maybe complete exhaustion or depression or anger, whatever it's going to be. You have a way to find answers. And yep, it's going to take some time, and it's going to take some changing of your diet, and that's okay, because you can either choose to be healthy or you can choose to go into a disease pathway, which is on your way. And it used to be that people would have diseases of the elderly in their late 80s and 90s, and then it backed up to the 70s. And now we're seeing kids in their 30s having osteoporosis and osteopenia or cancers more than ever that used to be diseases of the elder. And it's all because of what we've been doing with our bodies.
Wow. 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 Well, I am so grateful that I get to see you and get to know you and get to glean on your expertise. And I know we're going to be working on some thyroid stuff for me in the future, which I'm believing is healing because my body is healing, right?
Right.
But I am super grateful, very grateful that you, number one, joined us tonight, but that you're willing to walk this path with people, because it's not a journey we're supposed to do alone. You talked at the beginning of the call about us. We're supposed to support one another. We're supposed to help each other with our gifts. And this is truly a gift and a passion for you. And I can't wait to read even your part of the book and all the things, and just see what all you have to share with the world. But I want to just say to our friends that are joining us tonight, reach out to Dr. Cindy. Get familiar with her. I'm sure she does consultations, but I know Oasis of Health dot
Healthcare.
healthcare. Thank you.
Healthcare. Yes. Yes. All right.
Okay. Say it one more time, because I was trying to talk at the same time you were. I don't want people to miss that.
Okay. Oasis of Health .healthcare.
Yes. And you can also find Dr. Cindy on social media. And you can come join us on Thursday mornings at the Taylor Area B2B, where we have a lot of fun every
We
week.
really do. Yes.
We have
I
a
look
great.
at this every week. It is so much fun.
It is. Thank you. Well, Dr. Cindy, thank you for joining us tonight. And I'm so grateful again to know you. Health is pillar 5 for me in my unbreakable life journey. It is right in there. If we're going to build a life of being unbreakable and really living our life's purpose, that is a piece of it. Because without our pillar of health, we're not able to stand fully. So, friends, thank you for watching us tonight. Dr. Cindy, thank you for being on with me. And until next week, I hope that you embrace our 7 pillars and start working towards your unbreakable life. See you soon, guys. Bye.